Morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Carolyn. Victoria, nice to see you. Chris, hello. Hello, Art. Hello, Kate, Jan, and Patricia. Welcome, welcome, and thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. So when we launched the Forward movement here in New Jersey, we had the pleasure of having an incredible turnout at our very first event in Kearney. And I had the honor of meeting Sue Davies. And Sue, from the minute I met her, was just so knowledgeable, so passionate about democracy reform, had incredible questions and even more incredible inputs during the meeting. So Sue and I have kept in touch during our, synchronistic battle for democracy reform here in New Jersey. So it only made sense that Sue would eventually get to speak to our supporters here. And many of you actually probably already know her because she is very active, throughout New Jersey. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Sue in just a second. If everyone could do me a favor, I put a link in the chat. If you could just sign in when you have a chance. This way you can get credit for attendance and little goodies that'll come with that throughout the year. And with that being said, Sue, welcome. The floor is yours.
Yes, thanks. Well, appreciate your having us for this conversation about New Jersey, about open primaries here, nationally, New Jersey, and historically. And welcome to everybody who's here. So good morning. So I'm going to take you through a PowerPoint, which is about the history and importance of of open primaries. And what I'd like to invite people to do is ask questions as we go or make comments as we go. Hi, Victoria. And I see most people have their cameras off. If you're comfortable putting your camera on, I love to see people's faces. I also like to invite you, if you have a question, to either write in the chat or raise your hand or interrupt, because I love interruptions. I don't consider them interruptions or that interruptions are bad. So if you have a question, please pop in or comment. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will go through this together. Hold on one second as I reposition all of you. Okay, so open primaries. Some of what I'm going to say, probably some of you know already, but I'm going to give the full approach to it. And if, as I said, if you have thoughts, comments, questions, please pipe in. So I don't care who does the electing as long as I get to do the nominating. Boss Tweed. So some of you may know Boss Tweed. Boss Tweed was the head of Tammany Hall, which was the Democratic Party in New York in the 1860s and 70s. There was so much corruption that he almost bankrupted New York City, actually. He got his friends had every office. There was, he ended up taking $200 million from New York City in the 1860s and 70s due to corruption. But his position was, as long as he got to select who got on the ballot, it didn't matter what happened in the general election, he was going to win. He was going to get his people in. This is actually a cartoon of Boss Tweed. So he ended up at the end of his life in jail. But democracy was very, very hurt by him, and he serves an example of this. So Forward Party platform includes a lot of voting reforms. Ranked choice voting, approval voting, and star voting are on the platform. Nonpartisan primaries and implementing Final Five is on the platform, as well as combining nonpartisan elections and ranked choice voting, which in my opinion is the most fundamental change that can happen in our electoral process. And also independent redistricting commissions, because as we all know, our politicians right now choose their voters. The voters don't choose the politicians. So those are on the national platform. So we're going to walk through that a bit, about mostly with a focus on what is open primaries. So the best way to understand open primaries is that all voters vote. Okay, so right now in New Jersey, we have primaries. The Democrats vote in the Democratic Party primary. The Republicans vote in the Republican Party primary. And independents are allowed to vote in a primary only if they change their party affiliation to participate. So independents as independents are not allowed to vote in the primaries. So in terms of open primaries, it would mean everybody could vote in the primaries. And there are lots of variations of open primaries around the country. Some allow candidates to have party affiliations listed on the ballot. Some of them don't even have party affiliations on the ballot. Okay. Top 2, top 4, top 5. People have heard those phrases. Basically, that refers to how many candidates from the primary go on to the general election. Okay. So the top 2 candidates go to the general election. Top 5, the top 5 vote getters go to the general election. I already said the open primaries and ranked choice voting transforms elections. Open primaries have been around for decades. So the first state that had open primaries was Nebraska in 1934. Okay, so it's not new. California has open primaries since 2010. Candidates are on the ballot without party affiliation, and the top 2 vote getters move on to the general election. Okay, that means that there can be 2 candidates from the same party in the general election. Okay, which is likely what would happen in New Jersey as well. And Brian, you had your hand up.
I do have my hand up. Thank you for noticing. So with open primaries, the idea is that everyone can run. It doesn't matter with your party affiliation or if you're independent, right? And then from there, there's top 2 or top 5, where the top 5 move on, or maybe the top 2 move on to the to the general. But if you're combining open primaries with ranked choice voting, in theory, wouldn't that eliminate the need for a primary and a general?
Yes, you actually could significantly reduce our electoral expenditures and process by combining the 2. And it's called, in some ways, it's instant runoff, right? You would know who won the election as the votes are tabulated and reconfigured. So for people who don't know ranked choice voting as well, ranked choice voting means that you put the candidates in order of ranking, right? So you'll select Smith as your first choice, Jones as your second choice, Fernandez as your third choice, et cetera. And the lowest voter, the candidate who gets the lowest number of votes in the next round is eliminated, and their votes are tallied. Their voters' second choice gets tallied. That's how it works. So yes, you could eliminate the need for primaries in general elections. Absolutely. Washington State has top 2 nonpartisan primaries. Voter registration there is actually nonpartisan, so voters don't have to register into a party. And there's a long history in, hi Javier, there's a long history in New Jersey of nonpartisan elections. Open primaries and nonpartisan elections are equivalent terms for the most part. More than 70 of our municipalities in New Jersey have nonpartisan elections, including some of our largest cities like Newark and Jersey City, our 2 largest cities. There are 10 states that have open primaries with nonpartisan registration, and those people register to vote and don't have to pick a party. And there are actually a total of 19 states in the US where voters register without register to vote without registering in a party. Okay. So some of this I'm sharing just to get people to understand that the way the parties talk about this, particularly in New Jersey, they act like this is the only way it's done is partisan elections and partisan registration, but it's not. And there are only actually out of 50 states, there are actually only 12 states that have completely closed primaries. New Jersey being one. We're actually surrounded. New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware all have partisan primaries and closed primaries. So we're not in the hotbed of democracy in our mid-Atlantic area.
Sue,
yeah.
what is the background of the history of those states having complete closed primaries? Like New York is really a Democratic Party state.
Yeah.
So it's both parties probably are, were actively involved in that, but I was just wondering.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is in the West and the Midwest in the beginning were the most democratic states, not the states with the established political bureaucracies that have really, really strong democratic parties for the most part. That's always been the case, that we have some of the most democratic states have some of the most restrictive election laws, right? If you look at New York, it's not just closed primaries, but getting ballot status for a third party is significantly difficult. In New Jersey, actually, and I know Brian's going to be working on this a lot. New Jersey is not a very easy state. It's an easy state for independent candidates to get on the ballot. Actually, it's a not easy state to get ballot status. It's almost impossible to get ballot status. You also see some states that have initiative and referendum have been able to force the issue of open primaries. So in Alaska, where they just got open primaries, it's because they have initiative and referendum. In New Jersey, it's one of the most, in my opinion, New Jersey is one of the most locked up states there is. Our last constitutional convention was in 1947. In the Constitution, there's no procedure or way to call another constitutional convention. So there's not even a way to change, not even a way to change the Constitution in New Jersey. It doesn't have initiative and referendum. It's a whole host of ways that they've really locked up the process in New Jersey. So, and some of these states, because they've been able to control it so much, it's even harder now to make a change, because we would have to go to the state legislature and get the state legislature to vote for open primaries in order to get open primaries in the state. And so that's like asking the fox who's guarding the hen house to let all the hens free, right? let the hens run free. But the fox isn't going to do that. Except if you look at Maine, where Maine just now has gone to semi-open primaries, which was a vote of the state legislature. And what happened in Maine is that in Maine, they tried a whole host of democracy reforms before they went to open primaries. So they did same-day voter registration. They did a whole host of things, and then were able to build a democracy coalition that supported open primaries. Okay, so New Jersey elections, people know most of this already. So in 2021, 7.5%, or exactly 3 state Senate races were competitive. almost 95% of state senators were reelected. The combination of gerrymandering and the county line and the lack of choices is what leads to that. And another point which I think is really important is that in New Jersey and many states, the Secretary of State is an elected office and it's partisan. The reason that's important is that the Secretary of State is the arbiter of elections. And if you have the Secretary of State being elected in a partisan manner, there's no chance of having a nonpartisan process, right? It's really a big problem. It's like the Eagles and the Giants are playing a football game and the referees are on the payroll of the Eagles, right? There's no way the Giants are going to have a fair game. So that's an issue that I think needs further discussion. So when you look at it, when you have party-controlled primaries and the candidates only speaking to their party base. And the candidates are beholden to the party insiders in order to get the county line. What you end up having is partisan elected officials and gridlock, basically. A dysfunctional state legislature, and might I add, in Congress. So that's what the lack of open primaries produces. So what's the case for open primaries? Better outcomes, fairness, public funding, and voter choice. And I'm going to go through all four of those. But I'm going to stop for a moment and ask people if anyone has any questions or thoughts at this point. Not that people haven't been sharing them already, but I just want to pause for a moment. Okay.
Yeah. Well, as I'm planning, to discuss this with both Republican Democratic committees in my town, when I hopefully meet them, hopefully when this thing is already jump started, or if I get a new computer, how can I present this case from a local perspective? Like, is it possible for me to ask, let's say that Democrats for Hasbrook Heights, for example, that there is a Democrat case for open primaries, or there's a Republican case for open primaries, as a way to, put to jolt their brain a little bit?
Yeah, I think some of what I'm going to say next is going to address that, but I also think there's further refinement. I mean, I think that's a really, really terrific question. And so let's revisit that after I go through a little more of the presentation and see if we can kind of collaboratively discover some ways to do that, right? Or things we think might work better than others. So let's keep that question in mind. I think that's a really good question. Okay, so better outcomes. I said better outcomes, fairness, public funding, and voter choice, right? So better outcomes. Just putting some stuff side by side. And again, these statistics, they don't do the research side by side, so I had to sort of mush them together a little bit. But in California, that has, of course, open primaries, 50% of the races are competitive, okay? Versus 7.5% in New Jersey. Primary participation is about 33%. Again, not terrific, but 3 times higher than in New Jersey, okay? The approval rating for state legislators increased from 10 to 50% when they implemented open primaries in California. The approval rating in New Jersey hovers between 38 and 43%. So according to a Monmouth poll. Incumbents in California are actually 5 times more likely to lose than in New Jersey. Again, they don't lose as a huge amount because incumbents have so much benefits from being an incumbent, but they are more likely to lose. And then if you take a look at Alaska and you look at Senator Lisa Murkowski, who won re-election to the US Senate this year, even though she bucked the whole Republican Party. And part of why she did that is, well, first of all, Alaska's a very independent state. I mean, 56% of the voters are registered as independents, but there's also a situation there where they have ranked choice voting and they now have open primaries. So she was able to do that and win with 53.7% of the vote. So I think that's some of the case for why you get better outcomes with open primaries. Fundamentally, what open primaries means is that when candidates are running in the primaries, they have to speak to all voters, okay? It means that they can't just do a narrow message to the party insiders and the most extreme members of the party, a small slice of the party regulars, which is who votes in the primaries. Primary turnout's 10%, right? To put this in perspective, when Governor Murphy won for governorship in New Jersey, the first time he ran, he got 265,000 votes in the primaries, right? And you knew once he won the primaries, he was going to win the general election. Anyone know how many registered voters there are in New Jersey right now? When he ran in this election, there were 5.5 million registered voters. There are now 6.5 million. So 265,000 voters decided who the governor would be, right? That's under a closed primary system. Now, but open primaries force the candidates to speak to all voters, right? Not just the ones that agree with them. And as a result of that, there's less partisanship and less dysfunction. It creates the opportunity for people to work across the aisle because they need voters from every end of the sort of spectrum. Relative to fairness, I think that closed primaries are not fair to the people of this country because it results in a dysfunctional political process. So that's fundamentally unfair to the people of this country. It's also not fair to the party members because it lessens the dialogue and the range of possible solutions that are presented. So it really isn't fair to the people in the party, and it's not fair to the people in this country. It's also not fair to independents. So it silences the voice of independents and unaffiliated voters, who are the very groups that could be bridging the partisan divide. So the University of Arizona did a study a number of years ago, and what they discovered is that independents are the people that talk to all sides of an issue. They talk to Democrats, they talk to Republicans, they talk to other independents. They are people who could actually be helpful in this country to bring more discussion and bring people together. And those are the people who are being silenced and told you can't be part of the primary process. And we all know in New Jersey, whoever wins the primary for the most part is who's going to win the election. Nationally, 42% of voters consider themselves independents. In New Jersey, I said it's 2.4 million voters. It's 38%. We are required to join a party to vote in the primaries. And just to put it in perspective, say you live in Sussex County, which is all Republican, and you're a Democrat, and you get told that in order to vote in the primary, you need to register in the Republican Party, right? Because people oftentimes will say, well, just register in the party so you can vote and then unregister. But it's a violation of who we are. It's saying to us that we can't participate in the election as who we are. We have to become somebody else in order to be in the election. So, and then this past summer, our legislature has been having a lot of fun passing undemocratic legislation. They most recently in the summer, they passed A 3820, which prohibits unaffiliated voters from receiving mail-in ballots for the primaries. There's now the Election Transparency Act, which is anything but transparent, that allows dark money all over the place and really guts the election enforcement division in New Jersey, and which has just passed the Senate. And I know, Brian, you and Forward are doing stuff to try to, and we can maybe pop up the information for what people can do about that, because we need to let them know that we see them, okay? Even if we can't stop them, they need to know that we see what they're doing, and they're forcing these things through very, very quickly. So to just continue to maintain their control of our electoral process. So to continue on, who's silenced? I mean, 50% of millennials identify as independents. 50% of veterans, particularly those from the last 20 years, the Iraq wars and everything, they register as independents because they feel that they gave an oath to serve the country, not a party. 40% of Asians, 30% of African Americans, 37% of Latinos are registering as independents nationally. These are national statistics. So why do people decide because we can't participate in the most important elections in New Jersey, why would anyone decide to be an independent or to be unaffiliated? Well, most of the time people will tell you that I vote for the person, not the party, and I don't like the two-party system. Those are the two main reasons that people give. And the pundits and the journalists, the newspapers will tell you independents are leaners or closet partisans. They're not. Independents are more likely to talk to people of all political persuasions. As I said earlier, we are the people that could help bridge our partisan divide, and that's who's being locked out of the primary system in the state. So I wanted to ask if Victoria and Javier wanted to take a moment and a minute and say something about why it's important to them to be independent and unaffiliated. So Javier, you want to go first? And about a minute.
Well, why I'm an independent or why it's important to be independent?
Either one.
Well, independence a matter to not just New Jersey, but to our country, especially that our numbers are growing, and the uncomfortable truth for those who are faithful to the party is the uncomfortable fact that we are getting fed up with the antics of our politicians from federal to municipal. It's all because of a broken electoral system, and we matter a lot. We are a little more factual and more real world, experienced than the partisan hacks, and we are definitely equipped to actually engage in a proper dialogue on why our electoral system and our government needs to be fixed, as steadily as possible.
Cool. Victoria, you want to say a couple words?
Yes, ma'am. No, I'll make it quick. I know that's hard to believe, but I think I apologize to other people who've heard me say this. I mean, I'm probably the oldest person on this call. And since a little girl, I had a politically active family. And through my lifetime, I've seen where the duopoly of the two parties has not enhanced democracy in our country, but is actually, we're at a point right now where democracy is in big trouble. And you have to look at this two-party system, scratch your head and say, dudes, it ain't working. So in my, past life, I've been an independent prior, but at this stage, I don't think we can navigate some of our needs to change some of the injustices with gerrymandering and laws just passed in New Jersey and other ballot initiatives in other states without coming from the independent position. And so that's part of it, only part of it, but that's my Cliff Note edition.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria and Javier. Anyone else have thoughts or comments I want to share at this point around the importance of the voice of independence?
I'll say a few
Okay.
words.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say that the way that politics should work, like if you think about the US government and really when we were founded, right, while there are parties right at the beginning of our history, the idea of what a great country should be is basically a competition of ideas and letting the very best ideas flow to the top. And once they're at the top, we vote with no prejudice. We vote with no second reason, right? Without a hidden secret reason. We vote for the best idea. And the best idea necessarily isn't always going to work, but we should at the very least be doing everything we can to ensure that it's our best and brightest that are able to then vote for hopefully what is a handful of the best ideas that are going to move society forward, going to move our country forward. I believe that the movement of the independence, right? It is not something that, it's not important. It is required because without that sort of movement, without that sort of thinking of what's best for society and not best for a party, we are doomed within the two-party system. We are doomed where decisions are going to be made for us, not in the best interest of the people, not in the best interest of moving forward, but rather in the best interest of select party bosses, select politicians, select special interests. And that's why I say it's not important, it is required, because without the voice of independence, we are doomed for people who are not as educated as a lot of us are in the way of the world, who are going to end up defaulting to either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. There are good people in both parties. That is not my intention to say that they're all bad. But unfortunately, with the way the system works, the system is not designed to funnel out what's best for the country, but rather what's best for the select few. So Sue, I thank you very much for just being such a powerful voice for this movement.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for those, all Javier, Victoria, Brian. Important points. So let's move on to the public funding issue. So our primaries are publicly funded. They paid for by our tax dollars, right? And nobody should be forced to join a party to participate in a publicly funded election. And the argument is always, well, private organizations have a right to decide who should participate in their elections, but don't take our tax dollars then, right?
And if you take tax dollars, you are subject to constitutional regulation. Think of public schools, for example, or charter schools. If they take public funding and they get, and they're accused of misconduct, they could, they would have to sit in court and explain what happened. And
Yeah.
the same here. If these private organizations are taking public funds, they are subject to constitutional civil law. It's end of story.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. This doesn't make any sense at all, in my opinion, but and many people's opinions. Okay, let's talk about voter choice. Voters want to be able to choose among all the candidates, and as Brian just said, among the best ideas, among the best possibilities, among that's what voters want, not just independents. Every political persuasion of voters wants to be able to choose among the best choices and the best ideas. Right now, New Jersey primaries are often uncontested, giving voters no choice. The county line also determines who wins, and the county line is solely chosen by the county political bosses. And if you like somebody who's on the Democratic Party line and the Republican Party line, you're not allowed to vote for both of them. You have to choose one or the other. So closed primaries really restrict voter choice in many different ways. Elections already exist in 80% of cities. 23 of the 30 largest cities have nonpartisan municipal elections. In New Jersey, 70 plus of our municipalities have nonpartisan elections. Maine, Alaska, Nevada have recently voted in favor of nonpartisan elections. Nevada has to pass it twice in order for it to come into being. Most recently, the Republican Party tried to close primaries in Arkansas and Texas, and that was defeated. And there are new initiatives in the work in South Dakota, Oregon, a whole host of other states. In New Jersey, there have been efforts to expand nonpartisan elections over the last several years. In Red Bank, it passed. Red Bank passed having initiative and referendum and nonpartisan elections in the last election. Atlantic City, it was defeated. In Howell, they began the process to do it, but then weren't able to get on the ballot. And in Camden, they tried to get on the ballot a number of years ago, and they were, in a very underhanded way, kicked off the ballot because the actual county clerk gave them the wrong list of registered voters. And so when they submitted their signatures and it was compared to the new list of registered voters, they didn't have enough signatures and were kicked off the ballot. Surprise, surprise. So what are the open primaries? Just join the party and you can vote. As I already said, that means we have to change who we are in order to vote.
The biggest straw man argument I've ever heard. That's just baseless. Just join the party, you can vote. Just sounds purposeless.
Yeah. The parties have a right to have their members select candidates. Again, the issue is, okay, but you're taking my tax dollars. So are you private or are you public? New Jersey already allows independents to vote in the primaries. It's the same as the first one I just said. And then the last one oftentimes is voters won't know who to vote for without the party telling them that the having closed primaries is a signpost so that voters can know who to vote for. Actually, voters would know who to vote for if the candidates talked about the issues, and it was a serious debate, and they could decide based on the issues, solutions, and ideas that were being presented by the candidates. But those are some of the main arguments against open primaries.
Sue,
Yeah.
I was thinking about the question of Javier's question earlier about what kind of arguments to use or so. Because if you say just join the party and you can vote, right? So, and only 284,000 people voted for the New Jersey governor.
Mm-hmm.
That is like less than 10%.
Yeah.
Is there, and there's no minimum. It's not that a party says we need to have at least that a number of people participate in order for an election to be valid.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So what does it mean? Just join the party and you can vote. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Well, and it especially doesn't mean anything because half the time the primaries. So I did this once. I decided so we had an experiment once. We had a number of New Jersey independent voters go and vote on primary day in different places. So I did it in New Jersey. So I went to vote, and they insisted that the poll workers actually insisted that once I voted, my party registration wasn't going to change. And of course, I knew they were wrong, so I had them call the office, and the office told them, yes, my party registration would change. And then they got off the phone and they said to me, well, they're wrong. Your party registration won't change. So anyway, I voted, and then I said, okay, I want to give you my re-registration so that I can now, once you change my registration, I can go back. They wouldn't take it. They refused to take it. And then I got into the polling booth and I voted, and there was only one choice for most of the offices, right? So so it's really so locked up here in New Jersey, and this for state assembly, state senate, when candidates are going to be primary, they decide not to run, right? That's basically what happens. There's no open debate or discussion about anything in most places. If you go further down the ballot and you look at municipal offices, there tends to be a little bit more competition and a little bit more discussion. So it's meaningless. Just join the party and you can vote. If the problem is, and sort of referencing one of the things that Brian just said, it's not about the people, it's about the system, right? The system is set up in a way that there's no choice, there's no dialogue. And even if you decide to join the party, you don't really have a say. So the county line thing, which is unique to New Jersey, makes almost every primary non-competitive, even if there was more than one candidate, right? The county line is the first line on the ballot. So the county party decides who gets that line. It's a very unique New Jersey thing. They could put the next candidate, they could put somebody in line A that they want to win, and it's worth 30 percentage points, okay? They could put the next candidate in line K if they want to. Like, it's not A, B, C, D, it's like, but that county line really has an impact. Now, one of the ways, there's a lot of people trying to take a lawsuit and whatever to end the county line, but open primaries also would change that. It would have a very big impact on the county line. So anyway, but I don't know, Kate, if I really fully answered what you were just saying.
Yeah, I think what I was saying from this, the parties themselves are also excluding people. That is, that is,
Yeah. And they honestly, they'd be happy if 3 people voted in the primaries and it was their 3 people, to the point of you need to have at least a 30% turnout or a 50% turnout. They'd be happy if 3 people voted and they voted the way they wanted them to vote. They'd be happy with that because it's about control. It's about controlling a multi-billion-dollar industry and political patronage and all of that. That's what it's about. It's not about finding the best solutions to the multiple problems that we're facing and finding ways to bring people together in this country in a dialogue where we together figure out with our differences how to solve some problems. That's not what they're focused on. And as much as they say that it's bad that there's partisanship and divide, they win off of that. That's what they want. So, okay. So this is my last slide, and then we'll have discussion for the next whatever. So we just started a ResistBot way of sending emails and letters to your elected officials. So I want to invite you to sign to text sign PXAEID to 50409. We also have a petition that we're doing, which is on a Google Doc petition, which also has the information on how to also send your elected official notes. We meet every month, third Monday of the month. So you were also invited to our next meeting. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everybody. And I'm going to put in the chat the link to the
ResistBot.
ResistBot. Thank you.
So while Sue is doing that, I want to open up the floor and see, now that we're at the end of the meeting, of the presentation, if anyone has any questions around open primaries or around anything that Sue discussed. Art, welcome.
Hi, Brian. Hi, everybody. Sue, you're preaching to the choir. I've thought about these issues for years. So my question to you is the strategy that your organization follows, because I assume you can't do things like endorse specific candidates yourself if they happen to be taking a pro-open primaries position. And I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes, you're right. We don't endorse candidates as New Jersey independent voters. As an individual, I might, but as a New Jersey independent voters, we don't. We're also part of the National Independent Voting Organization, which also is national and works on these issues. And we also work with Open Primaries, which is a 501c4 that is working on open primaries around the country. Just didn't put that in my slides. But no, we don't endorse candidates. So, and what tactically what we're trying to do at this point is build, first of all, bring together people who are unaffiliated independent voters, so that we can begin to flex our political muscles. Okay, there are more independent voters than there are, and in New Jersey they're officially called unaffiliated, but I use the term independent all the time. We are more than the Republicans. You know, we used to be more than the Democrats. A couple of years ago, we were more than Democrats, but now Democratic registration has increased.
Right.
But we're 2.4 million people, and we don't have a voice in these things. So, and most of the elected officials don't talk to us. So we're basically trying to create more of an understanding of who independents are, and begin to build some support for a dialogue around open primaries.
Exactly. That's my understanding of the approach you were taking, and you've given the examples of the ResistBot messages. The problem is that there's a feedback loop with the way the election system is affecting who gets elected, not just in New Jersey, but the idea that first you close the primaries and you focus on the party getting its people, and then you have to deal with addressing public policy issues where you're left with either extremists and or people who are responsive not to the mass of voters, but to the people who have power in the party.
Mm-hmm.
If organizations like yours can only focus on approaching the general population, there's no one to force the people who do get elected from each party to publicly face the embarrassment of being accused of all the things that you've explained to us. if you don't have candidates who are in a position directly to challenge and debate with two parties who both love the current system, there are real limits here, especially since the mass of the electorate is arguably exhausted and increasingly apathetic from desperation and increasingly lazy because they don't think there's as much reason to learn about the issues or care about them anymore. So how do you think we can approach challenging candidates directly, even though any independent party is going to have to climb through these barriers that the duopolies put up in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very good question. And I take the long haul view on all of this. I've been independent since 1986, right? And in 1986, I worked on Lenore, in 1988, I worked on Dr. Lenore Fulani's campaign for president. She's actually the first woman and the first African-American to be on the ballot as an independent in all 50 states. People thought it was illegal to be an independent. Okay. And they'd be like, what, you're not really allowed to do that. And now we've come to the point where, 44% of the people identify as independents. So tremendous amount has changed. Tremendous amount has not changed. Our electoral process in some ways has gotten worse and more partisan and divided, but the American people are seeing more and more that that's not the route to go. So you're right. Trying to hold elected officials' feet to the fire is what we've been trying to do for decades now. And I think we can't do that unless we build a strong enough democracy movement. In New Jersey, there are a lot of different forces right now that are working on electoral reform, democracy movements. I think, speaking personally as myself and not as New Jersey independent voters, I think Forward Party is an extremely important effort towards that end. And I just think it's going to take a lot of people doing lots of different things. So the people who can endorse candidates, like the Forward Party, so the Forward Party had people sign a pledge that they were going to support democracy initiatives in order to be endorsed by the Forward Party. So I think the Forward Party does its bit. New Jersey Independent Voters does its bit. The people that are working on ranked choice voting are doing their bit. I think we need to build a broad democracy movement in this state. We need to have some victories, right? And then the victories we can build off of to build a democracy movement. That's how it worked in Maine, okay? And as I said, open primaries became something that got built towards, and they learned from their changes. That said, there are enlightened politicians around the country who are more and more dissatisfied with the system. And they're Democrats and they're Republicans, and they're coming forward and they're saying, I don't want an electoral process like this. And they're supporting open primaries and they're supporting things that would change things. In New Jersey, look at Christy Todd Whitman, right? Look at a whole host of other people that are saying this is unacceptable to us. We don't want to be elected officials in a system that is partisan, gridlocked, and ineffective. Because, as I said, the problem is the system. It's not the individual people that are our elected officials. Many of them go into it because they're good-hearted and they wanted to make a change. And then they get caught up in a system that completely shuts them down. So it's up to us as a people to actually build a movement in this state, because we're talking about New Jersey, to change that. And I think it's going to take a lot of different approaches. And New Jersey Independent Voters is one of them. Forward is an important part of this. And as I said, all the other work that's going on. I want to address, Chris wrote in a question. He asked, are those states with open primaries more challenging to get on the ballot? Are there differences for ballot access between open or closed primary states? I actually, Chris, unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that question. I think in some places, yes, in some places, no. So I can't, sorry, I cannot really fully answer your question. I will try to get the answer to that question, Chris, and get it to you down the road. But I don't have like accurate statistics at the top of my head about ballot access. So it is on overall hard harder for independents to get on the ballot than it is for Democrats and Republicans. When we ran Dr. Fulani's presidential campaign in 1988, we had to get 1.5 million signatures, which was 3 times more signatures than the Democrats and Republicans. In New Jersey, even though the number of signatures you need to get is relatively small as an independent candidate, it's still more than what the Democrats and Republicans need, right? So it's still unfair. And Tara, oh my God, I'm blocking out her last name, who's run as an independent, as a libertarian candidate, has been asking people to write a note to their elected officials, asking them to really make it more fair for independents to get on the ballot in the state. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions?
Sue, just
Mhm.
curious. I had something I wanted to say, but I just want to respond to something you said about the unfair blah, blah, blah with the, isn't that a good case for the ACLU?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Well, we
right.
yeah, we did a legal suit about I mean, almost 10 years ago around
And
the exclusion of independent voters, and it got ruled against. You know, it went to an appeals court, but we did not win that case. So there's been some discussion about doing it again and really talking about the pay to play laws and using that as a jumpstart. But we'll see. Because I think a legal suit is a good idea. You just need the resources for it.
yeah, and I'm thinking,
Javier.
Yeah, speaking of legal suit and legal resources, like as Victoria said, of course, you know, her and I may have to either look back to Mr. Corrado, who's an attorney down in South Jersey, who's also associated with the ACLU NJ, but also you know, there's a way we can also make sure that the national chapter takes note of this, because as a member myself, I always see letters that they send to me via email all about fighting, you know, racial voter suppression and racial gerrymandering, et cetera. And what they don't realize is all these dirty tactics that the New Jersey party bosses, both of them, are doing, are affecting, you know, voters of a different ethnic, you know, from different ethnic minorities. And you know, and based on the statistics that you know, in this War Party presentation that Sue presented, you know, there's a, you know, somewhat of a modestly generous number of, you know, AAPI Latino voters who are jumping into the independent unaffiliated demographic now, because you know, they too feel like they're being disenfranchised by, you know, Democrat and Republican parties. So I think that there has to be a way where to address this to the, you know, to the ACLU and say, hey, listen, you know, I know you guys always fight, you know, voter suppression laws and you know, voter suppression laws. I need, you know, you guys to take a big scrutiny in our state, because the way the electoral system is working in the Garden State is legitimately suppressing, you know, the vote of, you know, different minority demographics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, I think, a really strong argument to go that direction. And I think, like, so we used to, when I first started working with New Jersey independents, I would always do this argument based on the exclusion of independent voters. The reality is it's bad for everybody. It's bad for everybody to have closed primaries, and it's bad for our electoral process. It's bad for our elected officials. They don't. I mean, if I, you know, so if I were, you know, back to Javier's earlier question about what's the case for Democrats, what's the case for Republicans, I think that with open primaries, you speak to everybody, right? You actually get to be a more effective elected official, but also the depth of your support is not contingent upon the party leaders, right? It's contingent upon the people. And if you have stronger support from the people, you're in a stronger position. If you look at Lisa Murkowski, that's why she got reelected again. The party ran against her. They ran a candidate against her. If you look at Nicholas Chervati in Bayonne, he was the assemblyman. He was the sitting incumbent assemblyman. The mayor of Bayonne decided to run somebody else on the county line. And so Chervati decided not to run again, right? Um, why? If you had an independent base of support that wasn't just continued upon the party leadership, you could have just run, right? You could have run and fought it out. We all know there's all kinds of backroom deals that get made, but anyway, Victoria, you had something you wanted to say.
Actually, I'll try to make this short. I want to go back to where you were talking about the independents having a greater presence, so to speak. I know I'm not using your words exactly, but that we show that we are 2.4 million voters in New Jersey. I think we need, based on that, we need a strategy. We need to mentioned other groups are working. I think you and I chatted about this before. I think we need to sit with them and lay out a strategy. And regarding getting to some of the elected officials, yeah, it can be a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you can get in there because I think they're smart enough, Sue, and I could be wrong. I mean, I've only met with a few down here in South Jersey. I think they're getting to sense or smell a change in the wind. They're not completely stupid. And I think why they have ignored us in the past, they've been successful at doing that, because if you want something to go away, what do? You ignore it.
Yeah.
So not recognizing people and their presence and their position, that makes it easy for them to get away with some of the stuff they do. I think when you sit down and you outline how not recognizing this change and the ranked choice voting and open primary discussions that are national at this point is foolish. And once they hear that, I mean, sometimes you get this, somebody who's got an IQ over 50, which is very encouraging, that once you say that, they begin to listen more closely to you. I'm not going to say that they're, going up to bat for you tomorrow, but I do think they listen. And one of the strategies should be to be firm, or I don't want to use the word bully, but get ourselves in front of these people that are making these laws. And nothing else, some food for thought. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I do. I think we could take one last question, Brian.
Yeah, it's 12 o'clock. If anyone has to drop off, feel free, but let's go ahead and do one more question. Actually, before we take that one question, in case anyone does have to drop off, I put in the chat box, everyone. If you could take, literally, this will take you, step 1 and step 2 will take you a combined of like 3 minutes at most. If you could just click through there, and basically what we want to do is, everyone's always wondering, like, how do we get this message across? How do we fight for this? How do we advocate for this? There's a variety of different ways, but the simplest thing that you could do is reach out to your state legislators. And we have facilitated that process through ResistBot, through Action Button, where literally with a matter of a few clicks, you can actually get a letter out to your legislators, and they will read it, right? And know how we feel about open primaries. You'll have a chance to actually read what the letter is going to look like. ResistBot and Action Button are 2 different softwares. Try ResistBot. We've used it in the past. It works really well. And then if you struggle with it, let me know. I'm going to stay on the call to help you through it. Action Button should be a little bit easier because it's all just web-based. So you'll be able to just click, and it'll be good to go. And then lastly, once you've done that, for step 1 and step 2, then please go ahead and sign Sue's petition. If anyone has to drop off right now, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and send this in an email as well, but I'd love to do this while we're here online so that I can go ahead and assist you with any sort of IT issues. And I'll turn it back over to you, Sue.
Okay, cool. Dong-Min Jin has a question.
Oh, hello, sorry. I had a question about the petition. So I actually did them earlier, but there was a question I had about the Action Button one. Does it immediately adapt to like your state representatives, or do you have to like change it?
It usually will automatically, so it'll have an idea, but depending on the browser you're using, it may know where you are. And based on that, it'll identify your state representatives. If you are not in your legislative district, or for whatever reason, it's not figuring it out, then if you can actually click and update your address, and it'll give you who your state legislators are. So you don't need to know who they are, as a matter of fact. You just have to give a location or an address, and then it'll do everything else for you.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think Art, you have your hand up.
Yeah, three quick things. First, the hypocrisy in the way that the system works in New Jersey is most evident listening to what Javier said, which I think is one of the strongest points that's going to be effective going forward. New Jersey is probably the most diverse state in the union. And the idea that we have to paint ourselves either red or blue to really elect the best candidates is outrageous, which is reducing to a nutshell everything you said, Sue. Second, I think it's important when we work towards election reform that we always say something about civics education and voter education, because the vulnerability of truly having every vote count is if the voters do what the party bosses think they will do, which is not know who the best candidate is. To know who the best candidate is, you have to know something about the issues. And education should always be in the same breath as talking about voter reform. Third, you said there may be new lawsuits. I just read something recently that I had no clue about that offends me as much as anything else. Did you know that if an assembly member dies or resigns, the way that they're replaced is that the county party boss or smoke-filled room at the county decides the replacement, which means when you elect an assembly member, you're not electing the person, you're electing the party, because if something happens to that assembly member, you definitely get the same party. If you're an independent, New Jersey law says nothing about, it's like the Constitutional Convention, it says nothing about how you die. So if a forward party candidate is elected to the assembly, not because we're a party, but because we call ourselves a forward person, if they have to leave office, the rest of the assembly doesn't have to deal with that vote anymore. Whereas with the other two parties, you're guaranteed to have a Democrat or Republican coming back in. That sounds pretty unconstitutional to me under any decent constitution. I've never heard anyone else talk about it in terms of a lawsuit. I would toss it into the mix if you're talking to people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are all important issues, you know. It's pretty locked up, and it's like party bosses 10 and the rest of the state 0. You know, the ordinary people of the state 0. It's very stacked. And they've been able to operate in this environment for a lot of years. But we all know the more you get you use these kind of tactics to control people, the less solid your base of support is. And at some point, we need to be able to, you know, make our feelings known in a stronger way, you know. So I think it's 12:06, so I think
Yeah,
probably at
I
an
think
end.
we are good here. If anyone has any questions after the event, please feel free to, you can email me directly. I'm going to be sending a recap email out shortly with links. Well, actually not shortly, because I have to wait for this video to be uploaded to YouTube so I can include that for everyone. But yeah, if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to send them via email and I will facilitate them to Sue. But thank you all for coming on, staying on, and being so engaged. Thank you, Sue, for all the work that you do, for educating us, and for continuing the fight for democracy reform. And with that being said, I hope everyone has a phenomenal weekend.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good